Hello, my name is Luna. I'm 69 years old, a retired elementary school teacher. And for most of my life, I thought I understood the rules of family. You raise your children with love. You sacrifice. You stay up late helping with school projects. You attend every play, every game. And one day, they grow up. Say thank you, Mom. And maybe, just maybe, let you remain a part of their world. That's what I believed. But today, as I drove my old blue Subaru through the winding hills of Lakewood, Oregon, I realized something unsettling. The older you get, the quieter you become in other people's lives, like an old photo frame kept, but never touched. I was headed to my grandson, Tyler's 14th birthday party. My son Ethan and his wife Gwen had moved into a gorgeous home in Lakewood Hills, a modern development with smooth sidewalks, glossy garages, and neighbors who waved just enough to avoid suspicion of coldness. Their two-story house looked like something out of a catalog. It had a smart doorbell, a perfect lawn, and Gwen's signature touch, everything color-coordinated down to the garden rocks. I had picked out Tyler's gift weeks ago, a build-your-own RC airplane kit. He had always loved tech and tinkering, just like his grandfather, Thomas. Thomas passed away 5 years ago, and I still talk to him sometimes, especially on days like today, when my heart beats faster, and I can't tell if it's from excitement or quiet dread. When I parked across the street from Ethan's place, the curb was already lined with luxury SUVs. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the side mirror, gray bun slightly frizzy, crow's feet a little deeper than last fall, but the same blue eyes that once made Thomas smile from across a bookstore aisle. I smoothed my collar, picked up the carefully wrapped gift from the passenger seat, and stepped out. "Grandma's here!" Someone shouted from the porch. The front door swung open, and there was Tyler, tall, lanky, freckle-dusted across his nose. His smile flickered. Just for a second. He hugged me quickly, more out of obligation than joy. "Hi, Grandma," he said, already eyeing the crowd behind me. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." I handed him the gift. "Don't open it right away. Let it be a surprise." Ethan greeted me in the hallway, always so composed. He wore a pressed button-up and the same watch he'd had since business school. "You're 30 minutes late, Mom," he said, glancing at his wrist. "We were about to start without you. There was some traffic on Route 14. I lied. Truth was, I'd spent half an hour deciding between a navy cardigan and a burgundy one. Hijos de Navi. Classic. Safe. Apparently invisible. He ushered me into the living room, which looked like a spread from Architectural Digest sleek leather couches, a fireplace framed by imported stone, candles that hadn't been lit, Gwen's masterpiece, Madison, my daughter, rushed over, bohemian curls, oversized sweater, a burst of citrus perfume. "Mom, you look a bit tired. Are you okay?" I smiled. "Just the drive. Honey, you should have worn something brighter," she added, scanning my dress. "I've got a mustard wrap that would look great on you." "Thanks, dear," I replied, "but I like this one." On the other side of the room, Sean, my youngest, stood quietly near the hors d'oeuvre table. His wife, Heather, waved at me from a distance. She never called me Mom, just Luna, like a neighbor, not family. "How are the girls?" I asked. "Ellie won her school's photo contest," Sean said proudly. But Sophie's still struggling with her reading. Heather added with a sigh. Her teacher says she's not applying herself. I'd be happy to help. I offered. Voice warm. 40 years in literacy education. Remember, Heather's lips tightened. We've hired a tutor. Luna. Teaching methods have changed. The word stung. But I nodded. As laughter buzzed around the room and Ethan checked his phone again. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not quite part of this anymore. That I had slowly shifted from the center of their orbit to a distant moon. Present. But no longer needed. And that was before they locked me in the basement. I always thought I'd know the moment something changed forever in my family. That there'd be a loud argument. Or someone slamming a door. Or a dramatic holiday fight over dinner. But no. It was a quiet click. A simple metal latch. And the sound of footsteps walking away. That's how I realized I had just been locked in the basement. Madison had asked me sweetly, almost too sweetly, if I could come downstairs and take a look at the water heater. It's making that strange clicking sound again, she said. And you always used to help Dad with that stuff. Truth be told, Thomas had been the fixer, not me. I was the one who held the flashlight and handed him tools while he made things magically work again. But I followed her anyway. Wanting to be useful. The basement of Ethan's home was spacious. Too clean for a space that should be dusty and forgotten. The kind of place that had its own wine fridge. Laundry units. The size of small cars. And perfectly labeled bins on metal shelves. Madison pointed vaguely toward the far wall. It's back there. Near the dryer. I walked in. Heard her mumble something behind me. And then click. I turned around. The door was shut. And locked. At first, I stood there in disbelief. This had to be a mistake. A child messing around, a draft, a broken latch. I walked up and knocked. Hello, I called. Nothing. I tried again. Louder. Still nothing. And then I heard them. Voices. Above me. Faint but unmistakable. It was Ethan's voice first. Calm? Managerial. She'll be okay down there for a little while. We just need to have a real conversation without her interrupting every 5 minutes with back in my day stories. I still feel weird about it. Sean added. It's her birthday. Too. Sort of. She wouldn't understand. Gwen chimed in. She'd make it emotional. And this needs to be rational. What if she hears us? Madison asked. Her voice tight. She's in the basement. Heather said flatly. She'll be fine. That's when my knees gave out. I sat on the bottom step and stared at the locked door like it was a portal to a different world. One I no longer belonged to. They weren't just excluding me from a conversation. They were making a decision. About me. Without me. From their muffled words, I picked up just enough. A place called Brookstone Haven. She'll be around people her own age. It's safer. She left the gas stove on last month. She talks to Dad's photo like he's still alive. We can't let nostalgia put her in danger. They were talking about sending me away. To a retirement community. Somewhere with activities and a supportive environment and on-site medical care. Somewhere that wasn't home. Not the house Thomas and I built together in Ash Hollow. Not the garden where I still planted tulips in the spring. Not the porch where we sat and watched storms roll in. Counting the seconds between lightning and thunder. My house. My memories. My life. It wasn't just about where I would live. It was about who I was allowed to be. I wasn't sick. I wasn't lost. I had forgotten to turn off the stove once. One time, I had confused a new mail carrier for someone else because he had neck tattoos and wore sunglasses. That made me expendable. I leaned back against the concrete wall. staring up at the ceiling as if I could see them through it. My own children. Whispers and polite betrayal. Then I heard a small voice. "Grandma," I turned. The voice came from the top of the stairs, right on the other side of the door. "Ellie," I called gently. "Are you okay in there? I'm all right." "Sweetheart, don't worry. I brought you a cookie." "But Mom said not to open the door." I smiled, tears pricking the corners of my eyes. "You keep that cookie for me." Okay," she whispered. And then she was gone. And I was alone again. But not really. Not yet. Because that moment, hearing their voices, hearing hers, I made a decision. They thought they could lock me out. They had no idea who raised them. And they had no idea that their father, Thomas, had once built a secret passage in a house just like this. For Christmas. For magic. For love. And if I remembered correctly, that magic door still existed. And I was going to find it. I sat there on the cold basement floor, knees pulled to my chest, the sound of the party echoing faintly through the vents above. Every now and then, I caught pieces of laughter, clinking glasses, and that artificial cheer that only makes you feel more alone when you're not a part of it. But then a different sound stirred in my memory. Not a sound. Exactly. A whisper from years ago. Thomas. He had built something once. It was after we first moved into the old house in Ash Hollow. Tyler was barely walking. And Thomas was obsessed with creating Christmas magic. He didn't just put gifts under the tree, he staged them. He built sleigh tracks out of flour on the porch, reindeer hoofprints with an old horseshoe. And once, he even crawled through a hidden crawl space to surprise the kids from behind the fireplace. Every house needs a secret, he used to say. A little door for when life needs a quiet escape. Back then, I had rolled my eyes. But today? Today I was praying he'd been serious. I stood up and walked to the far wall of the basement. If he had followed his usual design and Thomas was nothing, if not consistent, the entrance would be hidden behind something ordinary. A shelf. A panel? Maybe even the laundry cabinet. My hands moved slowly, feeling along the drywall, knocking gently, listening for the hollow sound of a false wall. And then I felt it. A tiny notch, barely visible, tucked behind a stack of old winter coats and a bin labeled holiday lights. I crouched, tugged at the edge, and a small panel slid open. It was dusty, narrow, probably meant for storage. But it was there. A tunnel. I knelt down and peered inside. It was no longer than 10 or 12 feet, dimly lit by the sliver of light that followed me. At the other end, another panel door. If memory served, it would open near the laundry room on the first floor, right next to the kitchen. I took a breath. My knees cracked in protest. But I shuffled forward. The passage smelled of cedar and age and the faintest trace of peppermint. Thomas had once hidden candy canes in here. I remembered. I reached the other end, placed my hand on the latch, and turned slowly. It opened with a soft creak. I was in. The laundry room was empty, the hum of the dryer disguising any sound I made. I closed the panel quietly behind me and tiptoed toward the hallway. From here, I could hear them more clearly, my grown children. My daughters-in-law talking in that slightly hushed, overly careful tone people use when they know they're doing something shameful, but are pretending they aren't. I slipped into the hallway that led toward the half-bathroom near the living room. There was a vent near the floor that opened just enough for me to hear. And I listened. To their plans. To the calculations. To the excuses dressed as concern. Gwen Brookstone has on-site medical staff and weekend art therapy. Heather, we need to get ahead of this before she becomes a liability. Ethan, she heats that big old house alone. It's a fire hazard. Madison, can we at least agree not to do this behind her back, Sean? It's a little late for that. They meant well, didn't they? Or maybe they just wanted their lives to be easier. No guilt? No mess. Just a resolution. I closed my eyes. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even surprised. But I was done being silent. I turned and made my way up the back stairs, careful to avoid the creaky steps. If they thought I was some fragile vase collecting dust, they had another thing coming. Because I had a plan now. A quiet one. Calculated. Surgical. The kind that doesn't break a family but mends it in a way they'll never forget. And it would start with letters. I didn't want revenge. I wanted something deeper, more lasting. I wanted them to remember that I wasn't just some elderly shadow in the corner of their lives. I was still Luna. A mother. A woman with clarity. With choice. With fire still flickering beneath the gray. So I went to work. After slipping upstairs without anyone noticing, I made my way to Ethan and Gwen's bedroom first. It was pristine. Crisp bed sheets. Matching lamps. A wall calendar that mapped out Tyler's sports games and Gwen's Pilates classes. On the corner of Ethan's desk sat a stack of folders, one of which was labeled Brookstone Haven Financial Packet. Right beneath it, another folder with the logo of a real estate development firm. Maps. Property outlines. And a red circle around my address. There it was. Plain as day. Selling my house wasn't just about keeping me safe. It was part of Ethan's investment strategy. I pulled an envelope from my purse and slipped it inside the folder. Inside was a copy of my bank statement showing that I had enough savings to pay for in-home care, renovations, or frankly, anything else I might need. Along with it, I included a handwritten note. Ethan, I know what you're trying to do. I understand the pressure you're under. If you need help, ask. I'm willing to loan you what you need under clear terms. But selling my home behind my back is not the way. That house isn't just wood and nails. It's Thomas. It's you. It's us. Love. Mom. From there, I moved to the guest room, where Madison was staying. Her suitcase was half-zipped. Scarves draped over the back of a chair. Ceramic earrings left on the nightstand. I opened her sketchpad. It wasn't snooping. I'd given her this one for Christmas. On the last few pages, I saw messy notes and frantic numbers. Rent, kiln repairs, unpaid invoices. She was in trouble. I left a second envelope tucked between the pages. Inside a business card from my old friend Margaret, who ran a small gallery in Portland. She'd loved Madison's work. Along with it, another note. Maddie, you don't have to carry this alone. I've spoken with Margaret. She's open to showcasing your new collection. Let me help. You're still my daughter. And I still believe in you. Love always. Mom. Lastly, I slipped into the room Sean and Heather were sharing. Heather's suitcase was immaculate. Sean's corner had socks peeking out of his bag and a wrinkled polo draped over a chair. On the nightstand sat Heather's phone. Unlocked. A quick glance through the photo gallery showed dozens of photos of Sophie ballet classes. Awards. Rehearsals. But only two of Ellie. One of Ellie in a pink tutu, frowning. And one, my favorite, was her sitting under a pine tree, camera in hand. Sunlight catching the tips of her braid. She looked alive. I printed both photos on the small wireless printer connected to Ethan's office and returned to Sean's room. Then I left the final envelope. Sealed with care, Sean and Heather. Look at these two pictures. Which one looks like your daughter Ellie? Doesn't need a stage. She needs to be seen. She's not a project to sculpt. She's already art. I hope you can see her before she stops showing you who she is. With love. Luna. 3 letters. 3 chances for them to listen. Not to argue. Not to defend. Just to hear me. Before I returned to the basement, I stood quietly in the upstairs hallway. The music had softened. Dinner must be ending soon. I took a breath. Calm and sure. Let them find my words. Let them sit with the truth. Let them remember that mothers may age, but we do not disappear. And now, all I had to do was wait. I made it back to the basement just in time. By the time I slid the panel door shut behind me and dusted off my skirt, I could already hear footsteps upstairs. Someone had finally remembered I existed. The basement door creaked open a few minutes later, and Heather's sharp voice called out, "Luna!" I stayed seated in the chair by the water heater, legs crossed, back straight, as if I'd been there the whole time. She poked her head in, clearly startled that I wasn't in a heap or rattling the doorknob. "There you are." We totally lost track of time with the cake, and I'm sure you did, I said calmly. Standing. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't accuse her. Just let the silence do the heavy lifting. She stepped aside, letting me pass with that brittle smile people give when they're not sure if they're the villain or just caught acting like one. I walked up the stairs slowly, letting the hum of family noise swell around me. Dishes clinking, children's laughter, chairs scooting back on tile floors. And then, just as I reached the landing, Ethan stepped into the hallway. "Mom," he said, trying too hard to sound casual. "There you are. We thought you'd gone for a walk." "Through a locked door?" I asked, tilting my head. He flinched. "I'd love to join everyone for dinner," I added, brushing past him. The dining room was already set. Roasted chicken, sweet potatoes, a fancy kale salad that no one actually liked, but Gwen insisted on serving. Everyone looked up when I entered. Some with guilt, some with curiosity, and some like Madison with genuine worry. "Let's eat," I said, sitting at the head of the table before anyone could protest. Tyler launched into a story about his science fair project, and for a moment, things almost felt normal. But I could see the shift. Ethan kept glancing toward the hallway. Sean looked like someone had just told him he was failing a test. Madison wouldn't make eye contact. And then it happened. The moment I knew would come. Gwen set down her fork, took a deep breath, and said, "Luna, we need to talk." I folded my napkin. "About Brookstone Haven silence." Sean dropped his fork. Ethan paled. "How did you—" Gwen began, her voice trailing off. "I heard everything," I said, looking around the table. "From the basement. From the hallway. From the laundry room. This house isn't as soundproof as you think. Mom, we were just Ethan tried. Planning my relocation. Without me. Behind locked doors. It wasn't like that," Heather said. "We were trying to figure out what's best for me," I interrupted. "Or for yourselves," Madison reached out. "Mom, I didn't agree to any of it. I wanted to tell you." I nodded. "And I believe you. That's why I left you something." Ethan's eyes widened. "Wait. That was you. I left something for all of you," I said. "While you were talking about my decline, I was moving through this house, reminding each of you who raised you." Sean looked down at his plate. Gwen reached for her water glass. Even the kids had gone quiet. Do you really think I don't know what's happening? I continued. Do you think I don't see the exhaustion in your faces, the tension in your marriages, the fear in your eyes when you talk about money or failure or losing control? They didn't answer. Then let me tell you what I see, I said. Softer now. I see a son trying to hide his career falling apart. A daughter drowning in silence and debt. Another son afraid to speak in his own home. And grandchildren beautiful. Brilliant grandchildren being molded into something they're not. I'm sorry, Ethan whispered. I don't need an apology. I replied, I need honesty. And I need respect. I am still here. Still capable. And my life is not a boardroom strategy. Sean swallowed hard. What do you want? Mom, I looked around at the faces I loved. Even when they failed me. I want you to visit. I want to help when I can. I want to stay in my home until I choose otherwise. And I want you to stop treating me like a burden wrapped in gray hair and nostalgia. Madison was crying now. Openly. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out the envelope I had left. He held it up. Would that loan offer still stand? I smiled. Let's talk after dessert. The lasagna was lukewarm by the time we served it. But no one seemed to mind. After our conversation, the air in the dining room had shifted, not lighter. Not heavier. Just real. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm, not because everyone is exhausted, but because something has finally been cleared away. Tyler talked about school. Ellie showed me a few photos she'd taken that week. One of a squirrel hanging from the bird feeder. Another of a golden tree, reflected in a puddle. Gwen asked if I wanted more wine. I declined, but thanked her. And when dessert was finally passed around, store-bought cupcakes with 14 candles, smudged by frosting, Madison leaned in close and whispered, I called Margaret. She wants to see my latest pieces next Friday. I squeezed her hand. Good. Wear something bold. As the evening wrapped up, the kids ran off to the living room to play video games. And the adults carried dishes into the kitchen with that tentative grace that only follows confrontation. It wasn't quite forgiveness yet. But it was the start. By the time I gathered my coat and bag, the sun had dipped low, painting the front porch in soft gold. I turned back to Ethan. Tell Gwen thank you for dinner. I said, and the salad? Even if kale still tastes like punishment. He actually laughed. A real, chest-deep laugh. I hadn't heard from him in years. I'll walk you out, he said. At my car. He hesitated. Mom, he began, rubbing the back of his neck. About the loan, we'll talk during the week. I said, come by the house. Bring Tyler. I'll make lemon bars. I don't deserve you, he muttered. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Maybe not. But you've got me anyway. He leaned in and hugged me. A real hug. As I started the engine, I caught a glimpse of movement in the rear-view mirror, Sean waving from the porch. Ellie standing beside him, giving me a little thumbs up. And just behind them, Madison leaned against the doorway, arms crossed but smiling like she used to when she was little and proud of herself for telling the truth. I drove slow. Back roads. Windows cracked. Autumn air cool against my face. The town of Lakewood Hills slipped behind me like a photograph curling in the edges. All these perfect houses. All these perfect fences. But behind each door, flawed. Fumbling people. Just like us. My thoughts drifted. To Thomas. To the nights we spent in our old house. Sitting on the back porch, under wool blankets. Listening to crickets. Sharing secrets we never told the kids. He used to say, The older we get, Luna, the more invisible we become. So don't let them forget you. Stay loud when you need to. Stay kind when it matters most. I had tried both. And tonight, I think it worked. When I reached Ash Hollow, the first thing I noticed was the light in the kitchen window. I had left it on that morning, not knowing what kind of night I'd come home to. It cast a warm glow across the driveway, welcoming me like an old friend. Inside, everything was exactly how I'd left it. The framed photos on the hallway shelf, the dent in the stair rail Thomas had accidentally made when moving the old piano, the blanket Ellie loved, curled on the arm of the sofa. I set my bag down, kicked off my shoes, and went to the kitchen. The kettle went on, the same way it had every night for 40 years. And I smiled, because I was home, not just in the house, but in myself. I didn't need to be rescued, relocated, or repackaged for safety. I needed to be heard, to be seen, and maybe I finally was. As I sipped my tea, I looked over at the photo of Thomas on the shelf above the sink. I raised my cup. We did okay. I whispered. They're learning, just like we did. Outside, the wind rustled the oak trees we planted together, and I knew some roots run too deep to be moved.